Have you ever imagined waking up to find yourself transformed into a strange creature? This is how Franz Kafka's bizarre and unsettling world begins in his most famous novel, The Metamorphosis, first published in 1915. It would later become one of the most significant and influential, yet enigmatic works of modern literature. The Metamorphosis is not merely a story about a man who wakes up as a giant insect. Rather, it serves as a mirror to the reality of modern humanity, its alienation, loneliness, and gradual transformation into something unrecognizable. Written by Franz Kafka, the Czech author renowned for his ability to embody anxiety and absurdity in his stories, the novel blends profound insight with dark irony. Despite its apparent simplicity, this short novel raises complex existential and philosophical questions, becoming a defining symbol of Kafkaesque literature, so much so that the term Kafkaesque is now used to describe bizarre, absurd situations. So, what makes The Metamorphosis a timeless masterpiece? And how can such a strange tale resonate so deeply with our own lives? Let's dive together into a summary of this literary gem.
Chapter 1. Awakening. Before dawn broke in that dim room, Gregor Samsa was a man invisible except through his duty. A man in his late 20s, gaunt, with faded features, living as silently as a forgotten piece of furniture in a corner of the house. He worked as a traveling salesman, moving from city to city, dragging his suitcase like a beast, hauling its cart. Not out of love for the job, but to escape shame. The shame of his father's old debts that had shackled the family. Gregor was not ambitious, but he was loyal. He didn't stay up late, didn't complain, never stopped. He had no personal life, no friends, and poured every penny he earned into his family's pockets. He woke before everyone else, donned his worn-out suit, its color dulled from endless washing, and left the house unseen. Deep down, he harbored only one small dream: for his sister Greta to finish her music studies, to save enough to free his family from poverty, and perhaps, one day, to quit his job and rest. But he was never granted that dream. That morning, he wasn't awakened by alarms, but by a strangeness in his body. He opened his eyes slowly and found his back oddly fused to the bed, his chest no longer flat but arched, covered in a dark, hardened shell. He tried to raise his hand to scratch his forehead, but there was no hand, only something resembling crooked legs, moving erratically as if they didn't belong to him. "What's happened to me?" The phrase echoed in his mind, not with terror, but with exhausted bewilderment, like a worker abruptly dismissed without cause. He tried to rise, only to flail helplessly on his side, as if his body had become too heavy for him. The same room, the same ceiling, the same clock ticking on the wall. Yet time itself had changed. He had turned into an insect. For a moment he thought it might be a dream. But dreams don't last this long, nor are their details so sharp. The segmented texture of his belly, the tremble of his many legs, the clock's chime now painfully piercing his ears. He tried to ignore the catastrophe, because missing his train felt more urgent than no longer being human. If I miss the train, the management will be furious, and my pay will be docked. A pitiful reduction of his humanity. Then came the knocking, his mother's anxious voice, his sister's gentle questions, his father's sharp tones slipping through, and then another knock. The chief clerk himself. Panic mounted. He didn't know how to stand. His short legs slid on the wood, a strange sound escaping him when he tried to speak, closer to the rustle of wet leaves than a human voice. Finally, he climbed to the door and, with agonizing effort, opened it. In that moment, everyone froze. The chief clerk gasped, stumbled back, then fled. His mother screamed and collapsed. His father stared at him with eyes full of revulsion, not just fear. In that moment, no one saw Gregor. They saw a thing. And so began Gregor's grand journey. The obedient son, the silent provider, the dreamer of peace. A journey of isolation within his home and alienation within his own body. Chapter 2. The Open Cage. The door didn't just close on a body, but on a memory. Gregor Samsa, who once roamed cities and roads to feed his family, now found himself imprisoned, behind a door no one dared open, except furtively. No voice, no word, no call, just silence, thickening like a ceiling, lowering by centimeters each day. Freedom isn't about leaving, it's about being seen when you stay. Gregor, what remains of a man? Gregor's body no longer resembled anything human. His hard shell made faint scraping sounds as he crawled. His tiny compound eyes barely perceived the light seeping under the door. Yet, he still thought. Of his family, his job, the angry chief clerk, the debts. I'm a burden, not because I transformed, but because I'm no longer useful. He thought of how his room, once a refuge, was now a cage. Its walls reminded him of all he could no longer do: stand, open a window, embrace someone. Greta, playing the strings of nostalgia. Greta, his younger sister, was the first to dare approach. At first, she entered hesitantly, carrying a small tray with stale bread and milk, but she noticed he wouldn't touch fresh food. So she brought moldy cheese, a withered apple, yesterday's scraps. She smiled, though he couldn't see it. Maybe he still understands. Maybe he's still my brother. She moved furniture aside to give him space to crawl, but unconsciously, she was emptying the room of his humanity. The wardrobe where he'd hung his suit was taken out. The desk where he'd written his few letters was removed. The room grew barren, like a cell. With each piece gone, so was a fragment of tenderness. When we love, we don't erase the past. We leave it to witness we were there. Slowly, Greta began to turn away. She'd leave food and flee. She no longer cleaned his room thoroughly, just quick, wary glances, as if the creature inside wasn't him. The father, resurrected from laziness. Once a sluggish man who spent his days between newspapers and coffee, Gregor's father was forced to revive his limp body and find work after Gregor's transformation. He wore a shabby uniform, a pitiful hat unfit for his age, and walked as if carrying unforgiven shame. But he never forgave Gregor. He'd pass the door, clench his fists, never utter his name. Once, he threw an apple at him. Those who become useless are punished even when they don't resist. The mother. She loves, but cannot. The mother, physically the weakest, felt the most. She feared seeing her son's state, yet her heart raced at every sound from behind the door. One day she entered the room, saw him, gasped, clutched her chest and fainted. From that day, his emergence into the light became a crime. Love, when it cripples us, turns to silence. An open cage. But no exit. The room itself became an entity, not a physical prison, but a symbol of his isolation, present yet absent. The door sometimes opened, but no one truly saw him. In every corner lingered ghosts of his old self. The suit on a hook, the picture on the wall, a window that wouldn't open, and no one looked. The cruelest part of metamorphosis isn't the change. It's how quickly others accept you as a bug and forget you were human. And so, Gregor remained there, dissolving as a person before his body did. Chapter 3. Silent Hatred. Since Gregor's door closed, time no longer moved as it once had. Outside, days repeated: work, food, sleep, visitors. Inside, he melted into solitude like sugar in murky water, leaving no trace, no shape. The worst loneliness is living among those who deny your existence. Gregor asked for nothing. He no longer dreamed of returning to work or his human form. All he wanted was to be seen, not with disgust, but recognition. Even that became too much. The lodgers and the shame. The family was ashamed of him. When they rented a room to 3 stern, mustached lodgers, no one mentioned the creature behind one door, who was once their son. When love becomes a secret, it turns from longing into shame. Gregor hid under the sofa whenever they entered, watching their polished shoes, their hands gripping spoons like weapons. His existence now threatened the family's income. His silence grew costlier than his voice. The apples wound one evening. The door accidentally opened. He hadn't meant to. His bulky body stumbled into the living room, where his mother was cleaning, Greta sweeping, his father setting the table. When they saw him, his mother gasped, clutched her chest, and fainted. Greta screamed, then hid her face. The father lunged at him, furious, seeing only the source of their misery. He grabbed 3 apples from the table and hurled them as if stoning a monster. The first hit the wall. The second grazed his shell. The third lodged in his back. No one removed it. No one asked. The apple became a wound, festering, reminding him his closest kin now saw him as an enemy. With Greta's music and the murder of hope. On a cold night, as dim lights flickered, Greta played her violin. The sound was frail, trembling, as if she played not to impress, but to remind herself she'd once been a girl with dreams. Gregor, despite his pain, crawled toward the sound, mesmerized. For a moment he forgot he was forgotten, remembering only that he'd once been a brother who loved his sister's music. He inched closer, just to hear, to be part of something beautiful. But she saw him, stopped, stared coldly, then turned to her parents and said, weary and harsh, "We must get rid of it. It's not Gregor. If it were, it would understand we can't bear to look at it." A lifeless voice. Gregor didn't protest. He retreated quietly, returned to his room, didn't cry. Insects don't cry. But something inside him shattered soundlessly. True death isn't when breath stops. It's when no one sees you as human anymore. Gregor, once a devoted son, a supportive brother, was now a nameless burden. The apple in his back, the words in his heart, the sounds he'd never hear again, all whispered the end was near. But it wouldn't be a tragedy, just silent relief, like a long sleep after unendurable weariness.
Chapter 4. A Silent Departure. The nights had grown long, longer than time, slower than crawling, heavier than a funeral without a coffin. In that neglected room where no one knocked, no curtains opened, no dust was swept, Gregor Samsa died by degrees. His back oozed pus from the rotting apple. His brittle limbs barely moved. No food was left. Grete no longer entered. His mother's voice faded. His father treated him like a household obstacle. I no longer trouble them, yet I'm still a burden. One night, the room felt like an open grave, its walls breathless, its floor cold. The low ceiling pressed on Gregor's chest, as if scolding him for lingering. The only sound was the faint scrape of his legs as he crawled to the darkest corner behind the door, where no light or eyes could reach. There, amid frayed straw and moldy crumbs, he hid, not from others, but from himself. His body was crumbling, not just from the apple, but from within, from a heart unspoken to, ununderstood, unmourned. His time wasn't measured in hours, but in scenes that never happened. His mother never opened the door to say, "I'm scared for you." Grete never reached out to touch him, even accidentally. His father never knocked to sit with him, not as an executioner, but a father. Gregor didn't die from hatred, but from the absence of meaning. Yet he felt no anger, only lightness, as if something in him had finally been freed. The pain faded. Hunger stopped gnawing. Even loneliness grew familiar. He shut his small, compound eyes and exhaled, not like a dying man, but like one relieved to go. He died there as he'd lived in his final days, without sound, without a name, without anyone to miss him. A new morning. No one misses him. At dawn, pale light crept into the room, not warm, but pallid, illuminating only to reveal what remained. The air was stale, the smell suffocating. Dust, mold, and death without eulogy. The maid, a callous woman who treated living things like trash, shoved the door open, chewing, muttering. She glanced at the shriveled body in the corner, then laughed coldly. There it is, finally dead, that disgusting thing. She opened the window not for mourning, but to air out the stench. With her broom, she pushed the corpse like a dead bug. No one came. No mother rushed in. No sister screamed. No father stood frozen in loss. No tears, no regret, no farewell. Just relief. The family gathered in the living room, drank coffee calmly, ate a full breakfast for the first time in months. They seemed at peace, perhaps even happy. The father adjusted his frayed tie. Things are finally looking up. The mother suggested a walk. The weather was warm and Greta's grown into a lovely, mature young woman, she said, as if gazing into a future unburdened by that name unspoken that morning. They put on coats, stepped into the street. The sun rose. The city awoke to an ordinary new day. As for Gregor, he wasn't mentioned, wasn't buried, wasn't missed. The meaning of Chapter 4. This chapter's meaning lies not in Gregor's death, but in how others received it. True loss isn't measured by what we leave behind, but by what no one mourns. The novel poses a bitter question without voicing it. Is a person erased from memory when they cease to be useful? Gregor, once the family's backbone, vanished from their minds the moment he stopped working. His metamorphosis was merely a sharp metaphor for how the world treats those who falter, differ, or fall out of step. Greta, the sister who'd once been closest to him, ended his story with a cruel line. If it were really Gregor, it would have left. But she didn't understand. He had left the moment they stopped seeing him as human. The maid was reality's blunt voice. She didn't acknowledge tragedy, just swept it away. And society, embodied by the family, doesn't bury its embarrassments. It forgets them. Gregor's death wasn't a tragedy. It was a social necessity. And that's the real horror. This isn't just social critique. It's a mirror. Every reader must ask, how many Gregors have we quietly buried in our lives? How often have we seen others as burdens, not people? In our pursuit of productivity, do we make space for those no longer useful? This chapter is the heart of the novel, where death isn't the end of life, but the end of connection.
Kindly, if you like our work, support us with a like, encouragement, comment, or share so that the benefit may spread.